It's a lot to read. Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it. That's what you get paid for.
170569, calling for an election on November 7, 2017, for the purpose of submitting to the voters of Kansas City a question presented by the Committee of Petitioners through the initial petition seeking to authorize the city to construct a new single terminal at Kansas City National Airport with all costs paid solely from the revenues derived from the city and the operation of its airport-related facilities by allowing the city to retain fee title to and operational control of the airport, and to demolish such existing structures of the Kansas City National Airport necessary for the construction or no longer needed by the airport's operation without impeding on the ongoing operations of the airport.
Councilwoman Justice.
Thank you. Colleagues, this is the initiative petition that would place the airport issue on the ballot that was brought forth by the public. I have not received word yet from the petitioners that they are ready to remove this at this time. I'm not sure that that's an indication that they're not going to, but I think because of everything else that's happening right now, I would recommend that we hold this for yet one more week. And then we need to make a decision on what we need to do with this at that time. The reality is that the state of Missouri says we either have to put this on the ballot or we have to reject it, and they would have the chance to appeal that. And I think until we get through today's conversation about the terminal modernization project, that we should probably hold this for one more week to prevent any confusion. Unless there's objection, we'll hold for a week.
Councilman Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the charter requirements for readings of ordinance on 3 separate days be waived for the ordinances on today's docket listed as committee advances, and that these ordinances be advanced for final reading in consideration at this time.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the charter requirement for reading of ordinances on 3 separate days be waived, and that the ordinances on today's docket listed as scheduled committee advances be advanced for final reading and consideration at this time. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, clerk will call the roll on the motion.
Wagner. Hall.
Aye.
Laura.
Aye.
Fowler.
Aye.
Lucas.
Aye.
Reed.
Aye.
Shields.
Aye.
Justice.
Aye.
Barnes.
No.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
McManus.
Aye.
James.
Aye.
11 ayes, 1 nay.
The motion is passed. Clerk will proceed with the advanced debate docket.
170663, adopting the report and recommendation of the selection committee convened in connection with the request for qualifications and proposals for the design, construction, and private financing of KCI, request number 062017, in relation to the design, build, and financing arrangements for the proposed terminal modernization project at Kansas City National Airport, authorizing city manager pursuant to Chapter 3 of the Code of Ordinances to undertake negotiations toward memorandum of understanding and other initial contractual agreements, arrangement with the firm selected as most qualified, and if necessary, upon the unsuccessful negotiations determined by the council, a firm ranked thereafter in accordance with Chapter 3 of the Code of Ordinances, and recognize this ordinance as having an accelerated effective date because it relates to a design and construction of a public improvement. The Joint Committee recommends to advance and do pass.
Councilwoman Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This morning, your joint committees on airport and finance and governments had a lengthy hearing regarding this ordinance. This ordinance was originally filed by Councilman Lucas, and we have a committee substitute in front of us that was passed and advanced out of the committee today. This committee substitute, just so that you are clear, it adopts the recommendation report of the selection committee relating to the terminal modernization project. Additionally, we included in this some of the guiding factors that we want our city attorney and our external attorney to negotiate with the selected proposal. We have included very specific information regarding community benefits agreements, workforce, and other issues that we find to be important. And one thing that you should notice for everyone with your copy of the committee substitute that you have, we have attached as an exhibit, is what we're calling it, the Edgemoor team's outline of what they have said they would like to see with the community benefit agreement, and we're using that additionally as guidance, saying this is what we as a council and a community would like to see in our memorandum of understanding. Mr. Mayor, your committee recommended advance and do pass.
Thank you, Councilwoman Justice. Councilman Reed.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a few comments.
Mr. Attorney, can I have one? One to Jim. Oh, okay.
Councilmember Fowler told me not to take too long, but I want to take a good amount of time, and I won't take too long, Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you.
So as we know, the selection for the right project team for the new KCI airport terminal has and certainly is a comprehensive and very complex process. If we just pick up the timeline from May 30th, when the city issued its original RFQ, it has been very complex. And I won't mention all of the background prior to that point, but as I've said before, we need to fully understand exactly what we're buying and what the cost of it will be. And as I've said more recently, we also need to understand what the selected team will do to benefit our community. We set the expectations for what the selected team will do for our local workforce, the trade partners, the contractors, as well as the community benefits that they will bring. We set the standards, and then we also monitor the selected project team for what they actually will do. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but when we review what has taken place and getting us to this point, and actually selecting a team of the overall project team, overall there has been 1,000 hours that have been committed by hundreds of people to get us to this point. And I've stayed laser focused on ensuring that the integrity of this qualifications-based selection process has stayed intact. And I believe that we all have worked hard together to ensure that we get the best airport terminal proposal for the citizens of Kansas City. As I continue to say, a world-class city deserves a world-class airport. As the selection process to date, we know that a lot of words have been used to characterize this process. Words that we have read in the press, words that we've heard on the street, and even in this very chamber. Some of those words have been rigorous. Some of the words have been called difficult, lengthy. Some even characterize it as bumpy and messy, and even chaotic at times. But there's some other words that I've heard along the way I don't think are appropriate for the chamber, so I will save them. However, I also like to remind us that there's some words that throughout this process that have opened up the door for many other descriptions that we can use. Words like unity, progress, growth, transformational, and multi-generational community impact. And there's some good news that I believe that we could share, that we are nearly at the finish line. We've come this far, and I've got to remind my colleagues here in our community that as I called for this body for a vote of unity on August 18th for the ballot language, we were able to do it. We did unify, and we unanimously passed the ballot language on August 24th. That vote nearly now almost 1 month ago by this body, I believe set the tone and the tenor and the example of leadership and support that we need in Kansas City. This vote before us today is showing us that we can finally come together and choose, I believe again, unity. Gives us yet another opportunity to generate civic unity that we need here in Kansas City. Now, one could ask, what is that civic unity and what does it mean to Kansas City? Well, just in 47 days, on November the 7th, when the voters head to the ballot box to decide about our airport's future, just as they did in 1966 when voters in a 24-1 margin approved a $150 million airport bond issue following a campaign by then Mayor Ilis Davis. We need that same civic unity here in Kansas City to galvanize the voters for this very positive vote in November. If we come together as one today, I believe that we can make this dream a reality and also reap the benefits today, tomorrow, and for our children's children. As we prepare to vote, I share some of my most closely held intentions for this high-stake decision for our final selected project team. They are: we must come to a unified decision to help unify our city and our community. We must continue to make this decision not just based on politics and political pressures or undue outside influences. We must select the very best project team to build the best airport terminal for Kansas City. We must embody transparency, unity, and calm as we approach the finish line for this final decision. And we must safeguard this process surrounding this high-level and significant decision, and thus protect and also, in some ways, I believe, restore public trust. Now, I must share, Mr. Mayor and council members, that it's been an honor for me to serve in this capacity and provide leadership on the selection committee with my colleague, Councilmember Justice. The selection committee has done its work, and now the council, of course, is deliberating on this final selection. It's certainly not lost on me that there's so much that is here at stake, and gravitas, so much weight that this moment certainly carries. It's not every day. It's not every day that we as a body face a choice that will affect our city and our region that is so significant. Mr. Fowler, as I wrap up, let us accept this selection committee's final report and recommendation. Let us vote yes to enable the city manager to begin a negotiation of a comprehensive MOU to include many items that we included and discussed by Councilmember Justice a few minutes ago in the committee substitute for ordinance number 170663 for MBE, WBE, and participation, workforce development, and community benefits. I urge all of you, in a spirit of unity, that we accept the selection committee's final recommendation and report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Reed. Councilwoman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm getting a message from someone. I want to just have a point of clarification. Where's Galen?
I'm sorry, what?
I need to get a point of clarification from Galen. I think he stepped out. But I'll just go ahead. Where's he at? Oh, he's in the back. Well, I'll go ahead and read from the script to start with. But I just want to make sure I'm clear on what's in the committee subject before me, Galen, that what's listed in here is what was discussed this morning that was outlined. These things that are outlined in Section 2 are things to be considered for the community benefits agreement to be negotiated MOU. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, then this is the appropriate place. Thank you. All right, I move that committee sub for ordinance number 170663 be amended so that it reads, as in the documents, how the community substitute for ordinance number 170663 as amendment, which has been distributed to all council members.
Second.
Go ahead.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee substitute for ordinance 170663 be amended. Is there any discussion on the motion itself? Councilwoman Kennedy.
Thank you. This amendment will delete, this is somewhat of a friendly amendment. The amendment will delete the word small, section 2A6, as it refers to small local financial institutions, and also add section 9 under 2A, which would add an investment into the historic preservation of, the preservation of historic properties with cultural significance. And that is as modified in the previous two items, paragraph 7 and 8, which is similar to the Love Thy Neighbor as well as shared success.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Is there any further discussion on the motion itself? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the motion.
Wagner. Hall. Aye. Laura.
Aye.
Fowler.
Aye.
Lucas. Aye. Reed.
Aye.
Shields.
Aye.
Justice.
Aye.
Barnes.
No.
Kennedy. Aye. Taylor.
Aye.
McManus.
Aye.
James.
Aye.
11 ayes, 1 nay.
The motion is passed. The ordinance as amended is now before council. Is there a discussion on the ordinance as amended? Councilman Barnes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We went through a pretty lengthy discussion this morning as it related to the airport project and what our responsibilities are as council. And as I looked at what our responsibilities are, we are to somewhat ratify the suggestion of the selection committee based upon the proposals that were sent in. And I can attest to the fact that I spent probably more hours than anyone on the council, albeit from Councilman Reed and Councilwoman Justice, in reviewing the proposals. I actually sat in on all of the presentations. And we find ourselves now here negotiating things within the ordinance that other proposers had proposed in their proposals. And as I understand RFQP functions, if we're going to allow for the test to be retaken or give the answers after the test, that just doesn't sit right within my spirit. Now, as the young folks say, I'm throwing no shade on any proposer, but on the day of the proposals, that's what we're evaluating. And as it relates to community benefit agreements, the one we selected was woefully short in what they proposed. And that's the reason I will be voting no.
Thank you, Councilman Barnes. Councilwoman Lohr.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to think back to August 2015 when we first arrived here as a new council. The first thing on our plate was this airport, and Exhibit K or L or M or N or I don't know what it was. But it was in front of us, and this is what we were going to do. 2 years later, we're still looking at this. I was not a big proponent, and still am not. However, I have decided and have taken a stand that we will let the voters decide. And that's what's going to happen in November. On November 7th, we will let the voters decide if they want to tear down their airport and build a new facility. So not that I have just thrown in the towel, but let's just move forward and we'll see what they've got to say. If they vote yes, then I'm all in, let's go. If they vote no, then we step back and have to rethink our strategy.
Are there any? Councilman Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the selection committee for all the time. They did put in a lot of time, hours and hours of meetings, and it's a difficult process. I just want to reiterate a couple things. The committee this morning made its mind up on picking one of the out-of-town companies, and understand the reasons why. I don't agree with that. I think our hometown team put together a good package, and I raised the issues this morning, so I'm not going to get back into that. But I want to reiterate the two things that I did mention were that there has been a definite change in a lot of people that were previously opposed to a new terminal, single terminal. I was one of them 4 or 5 years ago. And in talking to them, the other interesting thing is that they feel comfortable with it because of the local workforce. The hometown team it's a simple thing, but it's an important thing. And so I just hope, I appreciate, and as Councilman Barnes said, I'm not throwing shade on any of the other proposers, but
It's a very strange statement coming
that
from
didn't
you.
sound so good, did it? No. But yes. I do want to thank, I think Edgemoor is off to a good start. They're out meeting with a lot of people in the community, and I just hope that continues. That's just not talk, and we see results. We'll know because this is just the beginning of the negotiation process, and we get to vote again on the actual agreement once it's finalized. But I will be looking to see, especially with our great labor force, there's going to be a lot of construction jobs, make sure everybody is treated fairly. There's open discussion. Our minority-owned businesses, there's been an effort and discussion started, but that discussion has to be finished. It's not just a discussion before we vote. We'll see that in the MOU when it's finalized. And so I just can't stress enough the importance of employing our local businesses to really create a hometown team on this project that will have a significant impact and help a lot of these businesses, such as the ones I mentioned this morning. Many of them got their start on one of these small projects, public projects, and grew their business from there. So we could probably see a lot more new businesses starting as a result of this. So look forward to seeing the final MOU, and I hope we are, the collaboration discussion and theme continues until that agreement is signed.
Thank you. Councilman Lucas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for the time you've put in, particularly Council Members Justice and Reed on the Selection Committee. I actually introduced the original ordinance, and I'm glad that we've had this conversation now. The goal was simply, in essence, what we're doing today, which is taking the opportunity to move ahead. I understand a lot of us have a lot of different opinions about it. I respect those certainly uttered by Councilman Barnes and others in connection with either process issues or anything of that sort. But like I believe Councilman Reed and Councilwoman Lohr had said, this is an amazing opportunity for the voters to have the chance to decide. And so as the voters have the opportunity to decide, I hope they can see that we've done our work. I think it's important for the voters to have seen that the council wasn't just a rubber stamp. Today we had a chance to look at what had gone on. We've added the committee substitute. I would also encourage my colleagues that while we have this committee substitute that talks about community benefits that now include preservation of historic properties, we don't have numbers, dollar amounts tied to them, and that's all right. But I would encourage all of us as we work on it to make sure that the MOU does include all of that. Because I've served on this council for a very short time compared to some who've been here before and some who are here now. And I remember during the GO bond conversation, we talked about community benefits, and we all came to a big agreement. And if I walked outside today, I can't tell you what our community benefits are tied to the GO bond. And I don't say that to throw shade as our word of the day, but I do say it to suggest that we need to make sure we follow up. And if we're saying that some of these things are important, we put community benefits in the RFQP. I think Councilman Barnes is right that perhaps we didn't always think about it as deeply as perhaps he would have liked or I did during the selection committee process. And so let's make sure that we think about it deeply as we go ahead. And as Councilman Taylor said, Edgemoor certainly is off to a good start. I also, though, want to say that I commend all of our other proposers who worked hard to get us here, not just those who are locally based, those who are based elsewhere, but those who are locally based who helped us start the conversation up again, those who are locally based and frankly affiliated with this team and many others as well. And so I just encourage this council to remember as we're talking to people about the vote, and it's important that we get a yes vote, that we have more work to do, and that hopefully when this project is approved and then when it's started, we can say, what are the community benefits? And it's not blank numbers next to a fund. It is that we've seen an investment of X or Y. We're seeing this contribution into our community, and it's something that we can be proud of. Because there's one thing Councilman Barnes didn't mention during his remarks just now. When I first talked to him, and I have a great deal of respect for it, that's the only reason I'm repeating it. Councilman Barnes, I don't think he'll be mad if I say it, said, the thing I care about most is that we have a project that's transformative for our community. Not just an airport, but something that's truly transformative. We still have an opportunity to do that, but that'll require more work both from the voters, the electorate, and ourselves as time goes on. Thank you.
Councilman McManus?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had our council or city attorney actually checked Google for throw shade for me and was able to provide some definition on that term. But I will just say.
Next thing I know, you'll be listening to rap.
Not in Westport.
I'm trying to bring a little lightheartedness to a serious discussion, but this has been a long road. You know, for the folks who've been on the council like I have for 2 years, it seems like longer. I can't imagine what it seems like for someone who's been dealing with this issue for 6 or more years. But the bottom line is, I think we're presented with a binary choice today. It's pretty simple. There's a lot of discussion about that choice, a lot of data, and you can get into nuances of bond law and other types of law and different legal questions. But the question really is, do we move forward or do we stop and start over? And, you know, to me, that's really what this comes down to. We may have different opinions about how to move forward, but the question today is, do we move forward with Edgemoor or do we stop and start over? Ultimately, that question is going to go to the voters, and they're going to be able to make that final decision. As Councilmember Lohr mentioned, they're going to be the final deciders of this issue. So, you know, I take heart in what's been said already. I take heart in the committee substitute that's been presented. I was pleased to be able to add an emphasis on the local hiring component that we want to see as a preference, in addition to the legacy impact of helping disadvantaged businesses, MBE, WBEs, community benefits, Those are all going to be critical components going forward. I think it's important to stress, as already has been stressed, that this is really just the beginning of a process that will take many more years if it continues, if the voters approve it. This will not be completed during any of our terms on this council, and that is a fact. But I think what we're doing today is signaling that we're moving forward because we think that the airport is important and we need to make progress, and that there's a sense of urgency in that. But we're also doing it because we feel like we need to have that legacy impact and have that be a central component of any negotiations that go forward. And central to that is providing opportunities for local businesses to succeed. And so I hope that as we move forward, that continues to be a driving force. I take heart in what Edgemoor has done in the short period that they've been involved in being the recommended proposer. And I want to thank those who did spend countless hours in this process, because while you were compensated at the city level, I don't think that that's a livable wage for what you did as part of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman Fowler?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I was giving Councilman Reed a hard time about making a long speech, and now I'm probably going to do the same thing myself. But I did like yours, and you can give more of those, and I won't give you a hard time about it. That was a good one. I'm kind of making light of it because this is a very hard vote for me to make. I always favor, whenever possible, the hiring and use of local labor, local people, and local businesses. I also am cognizant of the fact that we would probably not be where we are right now had it not been for Burns McDonald coming up with an idea to do financing that was different from what we had originally thought and different from the norm. They started the conversation. They invested a lot of time and effort into bringing forth and bringing fruit to that proposition and coming forward with a strong, strong proposal. All of the proposers did that as well, but we owe it to them a great big vote of thanks for what they did. And it's hard to then turn around and say, but you didn't make the cut. But I'm also a believer in process. And I believe in a process that not necessarily gets us what we want as individuals, but what gets us what is best for our city. We followed that process. People can throw rocks at that process. They have. They said everything they can about it, how bad it is, how secret it is, or how many leaks there are, the whole 9 yards. We've seen that thrown at us. But that process is there to make sure that we get what is best for Kansas City. It was followed not only by our selection committee, but it was followed in terms of the number of advisors that they had, and they had the very best they could find. I was particularly pleased. I'll tell you, at the beginning I was resistant to hiring outside counsel, but the team that got hired, I could not have been more pleased with. I've been practicing law for 37 years. I've seen some good lawyers. I think I'm one myself some days, but these guys are good. And they gave us sound legal advice. It was well reasoned. They were always on top of things, as were our other advisors. So the selection committee meets, they do their due diligence, they listen to the advisors. It is their job to put together what they think is best. And that is what has happened. They have given us a proposal that is, when all things are considered objectively, is what is best for the city. So I will vote for this. I welcome the Clark Edgemoor team to Kansas City. I especially welcome the continued presence of Clarkson Construction in Kansas City as part of this. As I said this morning, you're more than welcome to move your headquarters here. I am hopeful that after you've been here for a while, you will see some definite benefit to that. I've lived in the D.C. area for 3 years. We can go more than one block in half an hour in a car around here. I got stuck on Connecticut Avenue one time in D.C. 30 minutes to go one block. It wasn't because of any accident. It's the way it was. But still, it's a hard vote for me because it's just going to be hard. But I'm a believer in this process, and therefore I'm a supporter of this ordinance. Thank you.
Councilwoman?
Now, I have a stack of papers, but I promise you I'm not going to read from all of them, okay?
Please don't. Can you not read from any? Well, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Listen, as much time as I've invested in this process, I'm going to say something, okay? So, that being said, I'm going to save my thank yous because we're not done. We're not having even voted yet, so no thank yous at this point. But I would like to acknowledge the hard work of my colleagues, staff, the consultants, all the men in suits in here today, and most importantly, Charles Renner, who we have literally run him ragged. I think he's lost 20 pounds in the last few weeks. His suit's a little big today. But I think all of that goes into the underlying piece that all of us collectively as a council wanted a good outcome. We wanted something that we can be proud of and be supportive of when we took it to the voters. When we talk about champions for the airport, I've had the privilege to watch my colleagues, Councilman Reed, be a zealous advocate for the airport, not just as T&I chair, but just because he's always flying somewhere, and I think he gets a little sad when he flies into KCI. But he's been a very zealous advocate and has worked really hard for us to move this conversation forward, despite all the static. It goes without mentioning Mayor James. There were times in this process where it was very easy for us to create some infighting amongst ourselves because we did not agree on the approach. But we all agreed that we needed to do something, and I applaud you, Mayor James, for taking your energies and focusing them on the campaign, the November 7th election. Because just like me, you had something to say, and I appreciate you not scolding us for wanting to process a certain way and using your efforts more effectively out talking to the community. So thank you for your leadership on that. But that goes to speak of the collegial nature of Kansas City. This is the Midwest. You're coming into an environment where typically things are done by handshakes and gentlemen's agreements, and oftentimes because people have deep relationships in Kansas City. Many in this room, many in this process, and that's hard to overcome sometimes. I just sent a quick text to the city managers to clarify whether or not we had a local preference in our procurement process. We don't. We don't, by ordinance, have a local preference. But because of the collegial nature of Kansas City, that's how we prefer to do business typically. That was not what happened today. However, we move forward because we all agree that we need a new airport in Kansas City, something that represents the citizens of the city and what we have to offer. You talk about being a fly on the wall during this process. I had an opportunity to observe the whole time from the beginning, thanks to the work of my colleague, Councilman Lucas, to get myself and my colleague, Councilman Barnes, in the room. And as a fly on the wall, I had a chance to see the process as it unfolded. And that was a substantial investment of time. Makes me have a greater appreciation for committee work. And for those who have never served on a board or a commission or a committee of some capacity, so everybody who just got named by the mayor, good luck to you, because it's a lot of work sometimes, but it's important work. But the return on that investment is important. The return on the hours, and I believe Councilman Reed said we'd had over 100 hours at this point. I'd say we probably got another 30 hours post-announcement, at least, of discussion and deliberation and meetings and chicken dinners and public meetings with constituents to understand where we at and why we're doing this. But the return on that investment equates to opportunities for small businesses, as my colleagues have mentioned. Focus, recruitment, and opportunities for local workforce, particularly for those in disadvantaged and distressed neighborhoods. It's an opportunity for the developer that's before us now, Edgemoor, for their commitment to match its rhetoric, of being community-minded, of being focused on making this a transformative project, and we will see that in the form of the community benefit agreement. You know, we talk about doing what's right. That's come up a lot in this process, and what's right, and I said to my colleagues amongst ourselves that doing what's right, sometimes it's subjective, because people feel like what they're doing is right based on the facts as they know them. You know, as a prosecutor, I oftentimes work with first-time offenders. And, you know, one person shed some light on the situation to me, and they said, it's easy for you to criticize my choices when you don't know what I had to choose from. And so for those of you all who have a problem with the outcome of the selection committee, I had some concerns myself. But when you talk about what they had to choose from, you know, Troy took the hot seat, as he always does, man, because he made a choice that he felt like was in the best interest of Kansas City. And I didn't necessarily understand the path that he was leading down, but after having the chance to meet with Edgemoor and Clarkson Construction and the people who they've done business with over the years, I now have a level of comfort of the choice where we've landed. We lead by example as policymakers. I keep saying, we're elected in the political process, but we're policymakers, and we lead by example. And so as we had the unity vote several weeks ago, as we're going to vote today with an overwhelming majority, hopefully to support this Edgemoor as a developer, we're leading by example. And we're demonstrating to the community the ability to come together. And when we talk about this being a transformative project, what's transformative about this that I'm most excited about, and I shared with the mayor and with Wes yesterday at the reception for the MBEs, it's going to transform the way minority businesses do business in Kansas City. It's going to prepare them with the tools and resources and the knowledge and sophistication to move forward and continue to competitively build, be it on projects of this scale around the country if they choose to. So that's what I'm most excited about. So all that being said, this has been a long process. It has been hard fought, but I'm excited about our ability to move forward and realize some of these opportunities that we all want to see happen in Kansas City. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Kennedy. After 4 years of dozens and dozens of council meetings, 14 months of a 22-person airport advisory committee that I appointed, that met for 14 months, 18 of the 22 then decided and wrote a long report, all of which is available, that we needed to build a new terminal. After 2 years of the airlines working with the airport to reach their basic agreements to study the issue of whether or not we needed to do something with our airport, it wasn't whether, it was what. After the airlines and the airport committee looked at 30 iterations at least of major renovations, 30 iterations at least of new terminal designs, and having started with the idea that a major renovation would do the trick and then changing their mind when they figured out that it would not satisfy their needs and it would be more expensive to not satisfy their needs, they decided to back a $964 million debt limit on building a new terminal and declared that they wanted to expand here, but they would only support a new terminal. After all of that, after all the televised committee meetings, after all of the meetings that we had in public, after the advisory committee and after the airlines and the airport issued their reports, all of which are still available, and not much support coming from the business community and a lot of misunderstanding in the regular community, and approaching the debate and discussion of GO bond, I took the airport off of the discussion docket. And once again, as soon as I did, it was kind of like somebody thought that I'd stolen their birthday. And it was a, why did you do that? Well, why we did that was because nobody was paying much attention to it before then. So we moved forward, and I asked the business community to step up. Almost a year later, after not a single solitary business, not a single solitary developer, not a single solitary person had said anything about, we are going to do this, how can we help? Burns & Mack and Americo stepped up and said, we have a plan. They stepped up and said, this is what we think we can do. We think it's in the best interest of the city to do it. What we're offering is unique. We're waiting for the airlines to approve it. And if the airlines approve it, then we'd like to talk further. Before we got that far, the press got a hold of it. And then once again, I had stolen somebody's birthday, which is fine. I steal a lot of birthdays. That's why I look so young at the age of 85. I'm using everybody else's birthday. After all that and going through all the processes, the people who started the ball rolling in the first place were not the ones who finished at the finish line. And for that, I am deeply sorry. However, I have always believed, and continue to believe to this day, that the issue of who builds the airport is significantly less important than whether or not we build one. Because frankly, if we do not have a positive vote on November 7th, there will be nobody to build an airport because we will not be moving forward. There will be no community benefit agreement. There won't be 17,000 jobs. There won't be $2.5 billion of economic impact. There won't be a new terminal that expresses to the world who Kansas City is, what Kansas City is about. We won't have any better international travel and may have worse. We won't have any more flights, we may have less. We will not have anything at that time unless we have a positive vote on November 7, 47 days from now. So, I, for one, would like to get this vote taken, get this done so that we can focus on the only real question that matters, and that is yes or no on November 7th. So I would ask this council, after all that's gone on, to recognize that if, in fact, what I've heard people say is that we need a new terminal in this city, that the only way that's going to happen is with a positive vote on November 7th. We need to get on with this and get to November 7th. That is a point of unity that we should all be willing to sign off on, and I hope that we will. The last thing that I will say is that I sincerely hope and pray. I lit a candle in church the last time I was there. I won't say when that was. But I lit that candle in hope that Jolie Justice would forgive me one day for appointing her to chair the airport committee. She hasn't spoken to me a lot lately. I get a lot of sideways glances. But I think she'll get over it, and we'll have a hug at some point. But Jolie, you've done a marvelous job on the most difficult issue, and one that has brought you criticism as well as a spotlight. Spotlights deserved, the criticism was not. Thank you for that. Thank you for the effort, and thank you for the loyalty that you showed on the subject matter itself. Councilman Reed, thank you for your efforts and leadership as well. You did a good job. And to the council, we disagree on some things about process. I don't care about that anymore. What's done is done. We need to get on past it, get this vote made, get these folks in the seat, start negotiating an MOU, and let's get on with this vote, because from now until November the 7th, I'm devoting as much time as I possibly can to make sure that we do the right thing for this city, and that is to make sure that this city has a new terminal that will serve its needs for the next 40 years, and that in the process we're putting as many Kansas Cityans to work as we possibly can and doing something that will transform this city on a number of different levels. That's where we're at. I appreciate your vote on this ordinance today. And with that being said, unless there are any others who wish to speak to the ordinance itself as amended, the clerk will call the roll on the ordinance as amended.
Wagner. Hall. Aye. Laura. Aye. Fowler.
Aye.
Lucas.
Aye.
Reed.
Aye.
Shields.
Aye.
Justice.
Aye.
Barnes.
No.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Taylor.
No.
McManus.
Aye.
James.
Aye.
10 ayes, 2 nays.
The ordinance is passed.